Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit Ch.4 called Clint Ch.4. The link to the original will be down below, as well as the link to the playlist. And as always, I hope that you enjoy, and if you do, please consider subscribing. The trees swayed back and forth, branches whipping around with the whims of the blowing wind. The leaves turned red, purple, and orange for a reason, brushed against each other, creating a calming rustling noise. I gripped my rifle tight, my head on a swivel, thankful that my eyes, set on either side of my head and front and back, could move independent of one another. This gave me a distinct advantage when it came to hunting. I couldn't imagine hunting with two forward-facing eyes, unable to move separately. With my four independent eyes, almost nothing escaped my sight. Fwang appeared on my right, bounding in its graceful way, antlers curved up above its head. I ignored it. Normally, I would have rejoiced at the sight of one size of that. It could have fed my family for a week. But I was hunting different prey. I wished to become a chief at the hunt, and a simple Fwang would do nothing to impress the elders. No. What I was hunting was a Lord Foozy. Incredibly hard to kill to bring down a Lord Foozy. It was a mark of a true hunter. A great lizard armored from head to toe with rock-hard scales, 4 massive legs and a whip-like tail, and 2 leathery protrusions running parallel on its back. Lepazi was an impressive beast. Its meat was inedible, but its skin was very valuable, used in the making of warcloth. And the bones were ground into powder used to cure infertility. I knew it worked too, because my parents used it to conceive me. I had the power of the Lord Foozy in me, and I could not fail. The hunt had always come easy to me, ever since my 10th name day, when I was presented with my first rifle. A branch cracked to my left, and I froze, lifting my rifle, lining up the sight. Whatever made that noise was heavy, and the only thing heavy in these woods was the Lord Foozy. Slowly, carefully, I lifted my foot and gingerly placed it down in front of me, so as to not disturb the foliage and startle the Lord Foozy. I walked to this fashion until I reached the edge of the Lynae tree, the widest tree around. I braced myself against it and cautiously moved my head to the side, getting a better look. These damn bugs are getting really annoying. A loud voice shattered the peaceful calm of the forest. It was a strangely accented galactic common, but I could understand it. I sighed in frustration. If the Lord Foozy had been around, he was gone now, scared off by the owner of the obnoxious voice. I rounded the tree, ready to tell off whoever interrupted my hunt, and I found myself staring at a wall of red and brown. My front 2 eyes startled into focus on the same thing at once, traveled up the being in front of me, starting from the boots. Dark brown leather-looking boots were filled with feet that had to have been 3 times the size of mine, if not 4. Above those, the dark blue pants that hugged the legs wider than both mine combined. Of this great being continued up into the bottom of my chest. My eyes were level with a deep red shirt that was hanging loosely from the torso that was thicker than most trees. Over the red shirt, a brown coat that hung on the knees waved softly in the wind. The arms sticking out at the torso would have been comical in their size if they didn't look like they could have lifted my house. On the shoulders, nearly wider than my rifle was long, sat a head of giant proportions, and on top of that grew black hair, long enough to reach at the shoulders. The thing had a very angular face, all planes and lines, 2 green eyes that blazed fiercely out of the deep sockets, staring straight ahead. Normally, forward-facing eyes look funny to me, but on this being they seemed right. The nose pushed out from the being's face, starting from between the eyes and sloping gently downwards. Underneath the nose was a wide mouth. That, I could see, was full of bony white protrusions that I assumed were teeth. I had never seen anything like it before. Being a hunter, I was much more worldly than most of my tribe, as I went to the port to trade goods with skins and meat. But I had never seen this being's species before. I would have remembered, if only because of the size. I realized with a start that I'd been staring for a long time and cleared my throat. What are you doing here? This is a hunting forest. Only hunters are allowed, I demanded of the being. We're looking for someone, came a voice to my rear. My left rear eye had already focused on the being who said this, and I was not surprised when it spoke. As a two-eyed being would have been, this being was smaller than the first, closer to my height, but still taller by several inches, covered in a thick red brown fur from head to toe. This being was clearly a member of a race of Jahan, a filthy race that survived on the theft and trickery. I had been cheated out by more than one, and now I refused to trade with them. I would keep my eye on this one until it had left my sight. "And who do you expect to find way out here in the wilds of the Iwas?" I asked the Jahan, perhaps a little forcefully, but the sight of the Jahan always made me angry. "A weakling and a coward," boomed the giant in his loud voice. "Then he will not be surviving long in the wilds," I replied. "These lands are harsh and demanding." The giant laughed, a sound that sounded very odd coming from him. I looked at him, my front right eye spinning in annoyance. "And why do you laugh?" I asked. His laughter was resonating, and it would carry throughout the forest, scaring game for miles. "Because this is a pleasant little garden you have here," the giant rumbled. "Back home, we had forests that would chew you up and spit you out the bones. This place you could let a babe run free in, and he'd be fine." "Dangerous," he chuckled and shook his head. I puffed out my chest in indignation. I had lost friends in these woods. One of my eyes absently followed the flight path of a small insect, buzzing lazily through the air. The Jahan had a resigned look in his face, as if he had to deal with this before. The giant tilted his head slightly. "I seem to have offended you." "My apologies," said the being. "Let us start over. My name is Clint Stone, and this is Tedexchaku." He gestured at the Jahan. He looked expectantly at me. "Gem of Flinny," I grunted. This Clint was loud, and he was scaring off all the game. I needed to get rid of him as soon as possible and return to my hunt. There was only 7 days until the full moons, and I needed to bring the Lord Foozy back before then. "I do not wish to be rude, but I must get going," I said abruptly, walking past the Jahan. I would go to the fens. The Lord Foozy were known to use those as hunting spots. That was why everyone avoided them. My right eye saw Clint open up his mouth and say something, but the Jahan put a paw on his arm and dragged him off. They faded into the distance as I tracked deeper into the woods. Good, I thought to myself. They shouldn't be any more trouble. I hunted for the Lord Foozy for the rest of the day, steadily making my way closer to the fens, but I found no trace of one of the great lizards. This was strange, because when one was out hunting, it was almost impossible not to stumble upon signs of the great beast. The discovery was often accompanied by a hasty retreat in the opposite direction, but the tracks could be found almost anywhere. The sun had threatening to dip below the horizon as I sought rest. A hollow tree provided a sheltered nesting area, and I dragged myself inside. I chewed on a stick of jerky from my pack and washed it down with a mouthful of water, and was soon cradled in the warm calm of sleep. My rest was free of dreams, a rarity these days, as I awoke in the light of the sun, shining in through a puncture in the side of the tree. My limbs were sore from the night in the tree. As I pulled myself out of the tree, I stretched, reaching as far as I could. I blinked and saw a rifle pointing at my head. "Hey, you bunk face, get out here! Hands above your head." The speaker was a member of the Uine race, his smooth blue face disturbed only by the slight pocket in his center, from which I stared in a single red eye. I shuddered. I couldn't imagine my life in 2 eyes. What would it be like with only one? You would have to practically be blind. If I remembered the Uine anatomy correctly, which I did, the voice was produced by vibrating skin pouches on the side of its neck. As I looked closely in the front of my left eye, I could see the bulges protruding from his neck, a paler shade of blue than its face. "Hey, get moving, all day haven't." The pouches quivered in the Uine's neck. His galactic basic left a lot to be desired. "Bring pack and rifle." I handed over my pack and rifle, my heart sinking. I was being robbed of everything I owned. This would not have bothered me, except for the rifle. The rifle was my livelihood. With it, I fed my family and earned enough to provide for clothes and the technology that my offspring always seemed to want. Without my rifle, I could not regain what I had lost, and I would not be able to finish the hunt. The shame would almost be too much to bear. I could already hear what the tribe would say. that the wannabe chief of the hunt returns without a single catch. The Uain grabbed him roughly, slinging him over his back. He prodded me with his rifle. "Go! Walk!" And I walked, my feet shuffling on the ground, my head hung low. The Uain drove me deeper into the woods. At first, I thought that he was going to kill me at any moment, but the further we walked, the less likely that seemed. He had something else in mind. My right eye caught a flash of motion behind us, but I couldn't see what it was. "Where are you taking me?" I asked my captor. The sun had passed its peak, and we had been walking the whole time, through the thick underbrush, branches and vines tugging at my clothes. The humidity had steadily risen as we walked, and I soaked in the sweat. I was tired, embarrassed, and thirsty, and I wanted some answers. "Place," came the curt reply. "What place?" "Bad place." As he had no mouth, I couldn't see him smile, but the tone of the voice was right for a smile. I glanced around us, and I realized where we were heading for the fens. Sure enough, as we crested the hill, I could see them spread out for miles. The deceptively flat plain was full of grass, mosses, ferns, and other assorted foliage. The fens were the treacherous place if you didn't know your way around. Under the grasses and ferns was a thick layer of mud and rotting plant life, saturated by an underground river. It became very soft, and a misplaced step could send you to a watery grave. The Lord Foozy had made this place theirs. They could hunt in peace here, and their bodies would glide over the water ground with ease. To the east, across the fens, were the mountains where the Lord Foozy made their dens, carving them out of the solid stone. No one from my tribe had ever been there, nor anyone I'd ever heard of. The path through the fens was too dangerous, and only the Lord Foozy were to be found in the mountains. Terrible jaws waiting for anyone foolish enough to wander near. I did not know why the Uain brought me here, but it could not end well. He prodded my back with the rifle, and I reluctantly walked down towards the fens. Even up here, the ground was soft and gave beneath my feet. Midges. Translation note: insects very similar to midges changed to midges to avoid confusion. Buzzed around our heads, drawn by the scent of blood pumping through our veins. This wasn't going to be very pleasant. With the Uain goading me every step of the way, I gingerly stepped into the fens. The ground squished as I put my weight down. The next step was worse. Spotting moss, I stepped quickly onto that. Moss in the fens meant solid ground was underneath it, meaning a safe place to put your foot. I had once, in my foolish youth, traversed the entire length of the fens that way, stepping from moss patch to moss patch. Now that I was older and wiser, I knew enough to avoid the fens altogether. That was unless someone was pressing a rifle to my back. "Why do you want to cross the fens? There is nothing on the other side," I told the being with the gun on my back. I could see him stepping carefully where I had stepped my feet. "Much on the other side, great money, not for you," he grunted. I shrugged and continued on my way, searching for the next firm patch to set my foot. We slowly covered the fens in this fashion, me searching for safe ground, stepping on it, and my captor following me. I guess it was lucky for him that he had captured me, instead of those buffoons I had run into the other day. I was the only one who knew how to get past the fens alive. We made good time despite me having to lead the idiot with the gun. I paused, my foot hovering over the air. A thought had occurred to me. A very strange thought. I had not seen a single Lord Foozy during the whole trip across the fens. I should have seen at least two, and we should have been forced to hide from at least one. That was a mystery to be solved another time, as I still had to focus on not drowning in the mud. The ground grew firmer the closer we got to the mountains, and I grew more and more uneasy the closer we got. That was where the Lord Foozy lived, and one did not wake a sleeping dragon and expect to live. The mud turned to dirt and then to stone. We were at the base of the mountains, and they towered 100 feet above us. The great stone monoliths sent by the gods. I could see the black hole spread over the face of the mountains closest to us, carved out of Lord Foozy with their homes. "That cave, big one, we go there." The Uain pointed out with the biggest cave, set in the middle of the mountain. The stone was hard beneath my feet as I trudged up the slope, my eyes searching in all directions for any sign of the Lord Foozy. If I saw one, no rifle would stop me from running away from there as fast as I could. My captor seemed unconcerned by the thoughts of giant reptilian monsters eating us, as he did not make any effort to conceal his presence. As we got closer to the cave, I saw how truly massive it was. Dozens of feet high and hundreds wide, this cave could have housed my entire tribe with room to spare. Drawing ever closer, I saw the claw marks along the stone with my jaw dropped when I realized that this enormous cave had been carved by a Lord Foozy. To be able to reach the top of this cave, that Lord Foozy had to have been the size of a small transport ship. It was long dead, thankfully. This cave was over 100 years old, judging by the build-up of sediment and plant life. You go in. Distract Big Lizard, I get money. You avoid Big Lizard, you live free. The blue being said, Wait, avoid the Big Lizard. You mean there's a Lord Foozy in there? I asked incredulously. The Uane looked at me. What do you think made this? He gestured to the cave. It came to me in a rush. If it truly was a Lord Foozy in there, big enough to carve this out, that would explain why there were no other Lord Foozy. One this big would frighten off all the others. They would have gone to the hunting grounds, leaving this one ripe for the picking for the big one. What I didn't know was how I was never seen sign of such a large Lord Foozy. Maybe it had been hibernating and was now awake. Enough, wait, go! Ordered the being with the gun. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The voice from the forest, one of the belonging to the giant, sounded behind us. I was startled. I hadn't seen him sneak up on us, and I'd been scanning all around with my eyes, searching for any Lord Foozy. He strode calmly up the slope behind us, the Jahan following him. Both of them had mud up to their thighs. Clearly, they had some trouble navigating the fens. The Uane wasn't even more surprised than I was. Clint, thought lost you, Guru one, he said. He's pronounced even worse than shock. I've been tracking you and that gold you stole from me for 10 systems, Blue Balls. Did you really think that I was going to let a few fish hounds stop me? Clint's eyes gleamed with what seemed like excitement. I do have to be honest, though, that you did give us a fine chase. Blue Balls leveled his rifle at Clint. He spoke, a tremor audible in his voice. You back my gold, not yours. Clint's face grew hard. Did you really think that you could just up and walk away with half of the score? If you don't give me that gold, I will be forced to be angry. You won't like me when I'm angry. Blue Balls did not say anything. He just pulled the trigger. Clint dove to the ground to avoid the plasma shot. The Jahan drove to the side, crouching behind a boulder. But the shot never came. Instead, the rifle exploded in Blue Ball's hand. A loud bang echoed around the mountain as the Uane screamed in pain. His arms and chest were burned from the exploding gun, and his hands were little more than bloody stumps. My rifle fell from his shoulder as he thrashed around, flailing in pain. I grabbed it quickly, not wanting it out of my grip for a second longer. As I watched, Clint strode over to the stricken and, gripping his head in both hands, wrenched it to the side, silencing him for good. Well, that was exciting. The water must have done something to the firing block. That shot left a power cell that had nowhere to go but back. He sounded mildly interested in the whole process, and didn't seem at all affected by the fact that he just killed the being as easily as he would snap a twig. So, do we get the gold or not? Asked the Jahan. Right this second. I wouldn't, I said. There's a giant Lord Foozy in there. It could eat you in one bite. We'll be quiet, said Clint, and if it does wake up, it shouldn't be that hard to deal with. That sound shook the mountains to their roots. I was staggered by the force of that noise, but Clint and the Jahan seemed unperturbed. Their faces were calm, as if they had done this many times before. It seems awake, said the Jahan, in a voice that was too relaxed for the trouble that we were about to be in. The ground shook, deep in the darkness of the cave. There moved a shape. With the thundering, ponderous footfalls, the mother of all Lord Foozy emerged from the cave. Standing dozens of feet high, the monstrosity was big enough to eat the house with 2 bites. Its scaled skin was more than a foot thick, and its claws looked longer than my whole body. It swung its hand from side to side, and focused on the flaming white eyes on us. It took a ponderous step forward. And it's huge! Clint's voice seemed to grow ever so slightly higher. The Lord Foozy snorted, and the smoke erupted from its nostrils. With a flat tone, Clint stated, It's a dragon. I didn't know what a dragon was, but I did know what there was no way that we were going to survive this. If we couldn't run, the Lord Foozy would chase us down in 5 steps. We couldn't hide. There was nowhere to hide out here in the mountains of the fens. There was only one chance, and it had next to zero chance of working. I lifted my rifle and poured shot after shot into the creature's hide. My rifle was a modified plasma rifle, designed to focus as much energy into one tiny area as possible. This made it a very effective hunting weapon, as it could punch through the toughest of hides. Against this beast, it was like throwing rocks at a tree. It did no damage. The armored hide was too thick and too tough. My rifle would run out of power before leaving a scratch. There was nothing that we could do. The Lord Foozy lunged as we scattered. I dove to the left and the others dove to the right. The rocks were sharp on my ribs and rough stones scraped my skin. But I was alive. I saw through my right rear eye that the giant on the Jahan had survived as well. The Lord Foozy continued past us, propelled by its force of its lunge. Deep gashes in the stone marked where its thick claws had gripped and made its mad dash. "Is there any way to stop this thing?" The Jahan shouted at me. "No, the armor is too thick and strong. We don't have anything strong enough to penetrate its skin. If we can't go through the skin, we'll have to go inside it. Give me your rifle." Clint shouted back. The Lord Foozy had turned itself around and was coming back for another try. "Why? It won't work, the skin's too thick. Just do it, trust me." And strangely, I did. The stranger, who I'd only known for less than an hour, had gained my trust in a way that even I didn't know. I threw him my rifle, watching it spin, arcing in its path towards Clint's stone. He caught it and stepped in front of the charging Lord Foozy. I wanted to dive out and pull him out of the way, but the Lord Foozy was too close. We would both have been eaten. The Jahan seemed undisturbed by the fact that his friend had just walked into the path of a natural disaster. The Lord Foozy hurled itself towards Clint, more open-wide, the yellow teeth curved, wicked and sharp. From the red-toothed bed, the creature's throat was a dark abyss. Clint stood still until the Lord Foozy was on top of him, and then he leapt. He did not leap to the side to escape the Lord Foozy. He jumped into the thing's mouth. The beast snapped its jaws shut and gulped down a foolish giant. I started to run. I didn't know what else to do. I had no weapon, no cover. My only hope was to get one of the smaller caves and pray that the Lord Foozy didn't care enough to dig me out. Both of my rear eyes focused on the Lord Foozy as it turned around and began to charge me. I kept running, but every step I took, the beast gained 30 feet. I wasn't going to make it, and the Lord Foozy stumbled, its legs collapsing, and it fell, crashing to the ground with enough force to knock me off my feet. Several boulders rolled down from the tops of the mountain, but thankfully that was a singular event. I regained my feet and I approached the Lord Foozy cautiously. Its eyes blazing with the white, they were now pale and washed out. He was dead. I stared. I didn't know what could have killed a monster this big and not leave any marks. I hadn't heard of any weapons. Before me and I began to glow red. I backed away hurriedly as it bulged outwards. It burst into steaming white pus, flew out, coating me in a mountain wall behind me. Out of one eye socket climbed the giant Clint stone, my rifle clutched in his hands. "I guess you can start calling me St. George now," Clint said, laughing. "Damn, those suckers smell bad on the inside." I stared in awe. He was climbing down the throat of the biggest Lord Foozy in existence. Cooked it from the inside and then joked about it. This being was clearly insane. "TEDx, would you kindly grab the gold so that we can get out of here and back to Susan so that I can take a shower?" The Jahan walked into the cave and emerged later with a hunched over from the weight of a large bag slung over his shoulder. "Good day to you, Jem. You can go back to your tribe and tell them you killed the dragon today," Clint said as he handed me my rifle and walked away. Grabbing the bag from TEDx, I stared at the backs until they disappeared into the horizon. With a jolt, I came back to my senses and stared at the dragon. I had no idea how I was going to get this back to the tribe, but I didn't know that I would become chief of the hunt with this kill. Technically, I hadn't killed the beast. The stranger had, but with my rifle. And what is a hunter, if not his rifle? End of chapter. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.